Mm-hmm. And it's, I mean, that's something that Britta Bushnell, who's an amazing childbirth educator and an author of a book called Transformed by Birth, she talks about that, like
Mm.
holding two truths at the same time, which is like sadness and feeling empowered. And it's like there's polar opposites in a way, and so it's very complicated to hold both of them at the same time. But you know, sometimes both is what's coming up for someone,
Mhm.
and I think that's actually more normal than perhaps like one truth or one feeling. And so being okay with multiple, you know, ways of feeling about it.
Right. And really kind of digging in and like letting yourself feel that and not just, rolling past it, I think is important for people to actually spend time and, like you said, maybe go inward to those feelings a bit more than we might maybe allow ourselves. But at least right now, we all have been given this gift of like increased time in a way, which I think might actually make it easier for some people. Now, some people are working their tails off right now, and that's a whole nother story. But for people who are able to actually take that, like the time that we've been gifted right now, and actually ruminate on those feelings, I think that could be really a healthy thing to come out of this.
Mm-hmm. And like I said, if it's all feeling like way too much and you don't have the tools to kind of sit with all that, then like maybe then now is the time that like I said, to reach out for that talk therapy support,
Mhm.
because I mean, most of us need therapy. Most of us need, like someone to reach out to. Yeah, So it might be that it leads to more positive health,
Yeah.
than always sort of treating something at the when it's far gone.
No, and that's, I think there's been that stigma in therapy forever where it's like, oh, I'm not crazy. I don't need to go to the therapist. And, for a lot of people, like myself included, it's working through things, figuring out how you're going to strategize, problem solve, coming up with stress management strategies so that you can better self-regulate and kind of know yourself versus, you know, panicking and having to go in for like the emergent session.
Totally. I mean, the way I too is like before any sort of therapy session, I would just sort of like dread it, like I would dread it going to the gym. Like I would just be like, oh, I don't want to work out. But then I would feel so much better afterwards. And it's like a mental, emotional workout and flex these like
Yeah.
feelings you don't get to do. And then you feel like after a good sweat slash high, you like, you just feel rejuvenated and stronger. And so it's like, yeah, it's definitely a wellness thing that has hopefully become less stigmatized, but yeah, a great tool right now.
Do you have any other specific things that you want to share with, mamas right now that might be listening who are pregnant, who might be a little, scared, who might be considering a home birth as part of like their plan if they're, maybe due this fall?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I would say like I like really really check in as far as like, is this something that you really want? And if it is, then um it's really then maintaining that healthy pregnancy, both mentally, emotionally, and physically. Um and really getting to know birth. And by
Mhm.
doing that, you get a sense of what is going to be asked of me on that day. And if that feels something that resonates with you deeply and you are called to do, then that's great. If it's feeling like this is different than how I intended it to be, or that feels too much, then there are other options.
Mhm.
So reading birth stories, hearing birth stories, listening to birth stories. I mean, I feel like if you did no prep at all for giving birth, the least that you could do is familiarize yourself with birth as much as possible in the form of birth stories, because
Mhm.
that's the oldest tradition and the oldest way of sharing information anyways. But you hold on to facts so much more when there's emotion behind it, not just like from a textbook. And so
Yeah.
if you're hearing these women and birthing parents talk about these experiences, you time and time again, it's pretty quickly start to recognize like the patterns of labor and the very normal signs of progress that otherwise would seem really alarming, you know.
Right.
So you get to normalize a lot of the things that happen in birth, and so then you become as if you're, you know, as if you've been attending births, you know, for the last year or something. And I just think the more you can feel like you know it, then you don't have to think about it and you don't have to worry about it, and you can just sort of let it happen. And so and that, like I said, it also just kind of gives you a preview of what could happen. Obviously every birth is so different, but if it feels like it's still calling to you after listening to these stories, then that's definitely something to you know, keep going down that journey. But I mean, I really encourage clients to take really like probably the best care of themselves they'll ever take is in pregnancy. You know, with their nutrition and diet, with their physical activity, and with their stress. And
Sure.
because you are sharing all of this with another person directly. And so, and that also just plays into the birth experience. And so, and the postpartum, like the whole package. And so I talk a lot of in depth about all those things in appointments, but yeah, to not sort of treat it as like willy nilly, like women have been doing this for years, I don't need to like sort of do anything extra. You know, the modern woman is very different from a indigenous tribal woman who's, you know, or whatever, like from a long time ago that probably attended many births. And like I said, like got to know it really well, that she wasn't, you know, scared and didn't have to do anything extra. But there's a lot of prep that if we have the time and luxury to do the prep, it helps so much. You know, there may come a time in which hospitals are completely like they're at capacity with COVID, and you know, women in labor are needing, you know, someone ASAP. Like that's a whole different situation, you know. And you do what you do, and there are plenty of midwives who from the States who go to, you know, other countries who their specialties is delivering babies in times of crises, and
Sure.
like you just do it, and that's also actually somewhat reassuring. It's like it will happen, you know.
It's like what a calling to do that.
Yeah, I know. So yeah, I mean, if there is the time, like you are, you know, you're due in the fall, it's like now's the time to really kind of you know, check all the boxes, because I think the birth is seemingly like this big looming important event that like no one can get past when they're pregnant. Like they can't really think about breastfeeding, they can't think about postpartum, they just think about the birth, because it is rightfully so, it's huge, you know, but it is just probably, you know, at the most a day, maybe a few days in your life, and then you have the journey afterwards. And so, you know, the experience of your birth definitely plays into that. And so the more you can check all the boxes, you won't feel afterwards like, damn, I should have done this, this, and this. And who's to say it would have made a difference, but not to feel like you left anything on the table, and to feel like now that you did everything you could, and it's also a lot bigger than us too, you know, like, and trusting that part. Because I feel like otherwise you may have always have doubts about something, or residual feelings about the birth experience. So it's like, do what you can, like I said earlier, do what you can to control the process, and then at some point you just drop the reins and let go, because it's just gonna happen. So
Baby's got to come out sometime.
They got to come out sometime. But yeah, I mean, now there's a lot of time for people to do in the fall, and there's a lot one can do. And even if, like, say you risk out of home birth because you end up having high blood pressure, it's like, well, and you end up in the hospital, you know, with a planned induction. And even though you're exactly in the place you didn't want to be, you know that actually, like, this is just how your body tolerated the end of pregnancy, despite
Mhm.
all the natural ways of correcting it. And you can move forward a little bit, you know, you're a little bit easier on yourself and with a little bit more grace, you know, saying like, you know, that this is just sort of, yeah, what happens.
Now, have you heard from anything on your end, like if for people who are having babies coming up, not like right in the next couple of weeks, but has there been any indication of what might be happening in terms of hospital systems and births? Like if, do we have any indication yet? And I know it's been changing so fast, about what might be happening with hospital-based births, like if they're going to be able to continue to do that, or if they're going to have to start setting up birth centers that are outside of the hospital systems to accommodate and have more of a separation between, you know, delivering mothers and patients with COVID. Have you heard anything yet?
I mean, I think we're all just kind of taking cue from New York, as that just seems like that's the place where the most is, you know, happening with COVID,
Yeah.
and the most sort of the biggest response to how to cope with everything. And, you know, at one point there was the no partners, and then that got lifted. I had heard from another midwife that they were potentially going to lift the law that, you know, you can only practice medicine in the state of New York, that if you have a license, a medical, you know, license in another state, to come outside of the hospital. They're just trying to get people outside of the hospital, or they're actually graduating
Okay.
doctors early from NYU, so that, because they just need more hands on deck. Um,
Sure.
so they're graduating them early, and so, you know, it hasn't gotten there, and but I think people are thinking prophylactically and preventatively, and there are midwives who are already thinking about kind of setting up these trailer birth centers,
Hmm.
near a hospital, and just trying to take in as many people as they can. Again, like really making sure they are low risk, and this is probably more physically, but especially if they're like due now. But
Right.
um, yeah, it is also it is changing quite a bit. But I know, for instance, one hospital in downtown LA, California hospital, that I think they're doing. I've heard they're doing like a great job with, you know, as far as the nurses handling everything and wearing like feeling safe with clients,
Hmm.
and having their protective equipment so that they feel safe, and partners are able to go, and um, that there's not this, and there's not like mandated epidurals, which I don't know if you've heard about that in
I
other
have.
hospitals. And yeah, and
Would you
you
take
know,
a minute and explain that just so that people know what we're talking about? Because I've heard about it, but this mandated epidural, a lot of people haven't heard about this yet.
yeah, so they're mandating they're wanting all pregnant people who are admitted to labor and delivery to automatically get an epidural as a preventative and prophylactic for the need that they need a cesarean, that it's just already in place, if the need arises for
Mhm.
you know, a cesarean section. I'm assuming this is because there's less personnel or less staff on the floor who are just
Mhm.
available. So if the need came up for an emergency C-section, they want someone fully medicated already and not having to wait for that person to come in, or if there's only one anesthesiologist on the floor, or whatever it may be. But,
Mhm.
you know, it's really extreme, and definitely, obviously, it's just like a new kind of made up protocol that I think is just trying to control something, but it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me, because there is ultimately time to put an epidural in. But yeah, I mean, I'm not 100% sure of like what it's not the most rational thinking.
Mhm.
um I think it's just trying to, you know, also like that means the nurses are free to kind of uh they're not in the room so much trying to,
Mhm.
you know, fix the monitor on a laboring woman who's laboring unmedicated, who's rolling, you know, who's changing positions and getting out of the shower, and, you know, they're stationary and they're in one place, and so it kind of frees them up to be outside of the room and
Sure.
help other client patients and do their charting and so on and so forth.
Mhm.
So Um,
it
I think,
sounds like mostly a staffing problem because everyone is just so overworked right now.
yeah,
So,
I think
and I
so.
know that when I talked to Carson yesterday, one of the things that she was recommending to her clients as a doula was that if they were going to be doing a hospital-based birth, was just to simply call the hospital and find out what their policies were before going, just so that they had more information before and could be prepared for what they were coming into, so that they weren't going to the hospital and not knowing, going into something unknown and then having that anxiety on top of everything else. And so I thought
Hmm.
that was a really smart recommendation.
Hmm. And also, I mean, this is something we do as home birth midwives, is asking the, the charge nurse at the receiving hospital, are there enough beds? Like, I mean, we've sometimes asked that
Sure.
outside of COVID, that it's just a busy night and, is now actually a good time, especially with a non-urgent transfer,
Mhm.
it's, if it's mostly for pain management, there's not a sense of urgency to get there as soon as possible. But, and if the answer is no, then you save yourself a drive, and you
Right.
try somewhere else, or you continue to labor at home. But that the laboring person can ask their care provider, that they can call them, and then the care provider can call the charge nurse or the,
Sure.
receiving unit to get a sense of what's happening there.
Okay. No, and I think that's really smart because that's something I think a lot of people don't realize that they can do in any situation, let alone right now. And with how busy the
Yeah.
hospitals are, it's not like you want to be going in and trying to get admitted through the ER and laying there laboring forever just because you can't get in because there's no bed.
Right. Right.
So, so exciting.
It's so exciting. I mean, it definitely complicates. It's one extra thing, but
Mhm.
having that discussion ahead of time with their
Mhm.
physician, of like, can I call you? Can I call you in the middle of labor and ask you, like, is now a good time? And they may, that may have never been something that's come up before, but times
Mhm.
are different, and so yeah, that's all stuff to kind of figure out beforehand, I think.
Definitely. I think this is a time that everyone just needs to do a little bit more homework and be a little bit more prepared than they would. And like we said before, just participate a little bit more thoroughly in their own care.
Hmm. Which feels
So,
really strange because, our culture, we really rely on people outside of us to tell us if the pregnancy is normal, if the labor and birth
mhm,
is healthy, and it's really challenging to the psyche to have to, like, be a very strong participant in one's
mhm,
care, and play a big role in, like, in the outcome also of your pregnancy and birth. So
right.
um, yeah, I mean, like, it's scary, but it's also kind of exciting.
Some good to come out of this for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, well, if you have any other recommendations or if you have a resource list, I'm compiling a resource list from Debbie, who is our pregnant mama who spoke yesterday, and Carson. And if you have anything
Mhm.
you'd like to add to that, I would love to see it so we can compile a resource list for people, whether that is stress management or nutritional guidance or whatever you think might be helpful and important. We're going to compile that and post that up on the site. So, and I so thank you for your
Cool.
time and expertise. Oh, oh,
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is great.
there was a question that just came up mentioning hot and cold showers as a tool. Would you mind explaining a
Oh,
little bit more
yes.
about that?
Well, there's a my there is a kind of a whole theory around, cold therapy,
Hmm.
and many other cultures and traditions, they do hot and cold soaks and steams and showers, and really the idea is that you are, with a hot shower, you're kind of letting all the blood flow. With a cold shower, it kind of acts like a tourniquet, and it stops the blood, and then once you go back to a hot, it floods all this, like, fresh blood into the system, and so it's a
Hmm.
really good immune booster. It helps with sleep, it helps your skin, it helps your hair. It just is it just helps kind of flush things really quickly.
Hmm.
So yeah, you can start by ending a shower with cold water for like 10 seconds, and it just, or some people do kind of hot cold, but
Hmm.
there are fully like cold plunge baths you can do, but
Oh yeah.
a very simple way is to and even in like they're kind of like these old videos of birthing of pregnant women in somewhere like Russia where a way to induce is actually to like jump in the cold sea, for that
Hmm.
very reason that when they get out it kind of flushes things and gets hormones going. And just looking at that question, do you recommend during labor and
Yes.
during pregnancy? I mean, if you have the strength to do that in labor, then it probably would help a perhaps slow going labor, just kind of jumpstart things. But mostly, um, yeah, in pregnancy, doing it, like I said, every time you end a shower, just ending with
Hmm.
like a few seconds of cold. Um, but it has been used as a way for labor induction when you're submerged for a longer time.
Hmm. But yeah, in terms of the hot and cold, you were talking about it from more like applied stress and for inflammation reduction more
Yes.
so, and like
Yeah.
and for an immune system boost versus labor tool, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So perfect. Well, thank
Yeah.
you. I so appreciate your time. It was great to be able to talk to you today.
Yeah. You
Oh,
too.
oh,
And take
thank
care.
you.
And I'll send you my resources and
That would be great. So thank you so much. We'll talk soon.
yeah. Okay.
All right.
Thanks.
Bye.